All right, my computer just alerted me that it is 6:30, so we will go ahead and get started. Mr. Cusick, would you please perform roll call?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to our August 5th, 2024 board meeting. My name is Nikki Hudson. I have the privilege of being this year's board president. To my far left is our board vice president, Kelly Davis, board member Amber Epling Skinner, our treasurer, TJ Cusick. To my right is Dr. Bowers, our superintendent, board member Stephanie Harless, and board member Jennifer Best. If you'll please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as published last week for tonight's meeting?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments? I don't believe there have been any changes. Excellent. Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes, motion carries. This brings us to our visitor comments portion of the meeting. While Vicki hands out a copy of everyone who has signed up, just give me a moment to share with you a little bit about this section. The school board and administrative staff encourage and appreciate community interests and meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed to hear the views of community members about their schools and items on the agenda. Each speaker will be asked to address the board at the visitors podium, which is right there, so that the speaker's remarks may be clearly heard. The speaker should give their name and street address and limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes, please. Consistent with our policy 9130 on public complaints, we ask that complaints about particular employees be referred to the superintendent and not addressed during public session. We remind all speakers that our district values and respects all people as they are, and that our district is committed to creating and maintaining safe spaces for all of our students and community members. We also want to remind our community that while we value public input, we also always appreciate when our community members remember our district's values, refraining from using harmful or offensive language, and for sharing your comments in a civil and respectful manner. It is not our usual Yeah, on here, sorry. As we do not have a presentation tonight, Dr. Bowers, that brings us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. So our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We are T-minus 9 days away from having our students back in school, most of our students anyway, in Worthington Schools. So we have 4 vision statements for this report. I'll provide an update on each one of those vision statements. So our first vision statements, we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. This year, we welcomed 50 new certified staff members, 2 mental health specialists, 1 psychology intern, and 4 administrators who joined Worthington Schools starting on Monday, July 29th. With 20 retirements and 12 new positions for the 24-25 school year, it's clear that we're retaining staff members in Worthington at a very high rate. So this is good for students and, I believe, our community as a whole. Second, we will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. On Saturday, our transportation team and our elementary principal team held our annual first-time riders event. Hundreds and hundreds of students rode a school bus, learned bus safety, and hopefully felt more comfortable with riding the bus before school begins next week. So I just want to say thanks to our Worthington bus team for spending their Saturday engaging with our community. Our third items will provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. As we're T-minus 9 days, it's back to school time, so school begins for most Worthington students on August 14th. The Back to School page on the Worthington Schools website is a good place to direct families over the next week. This morning, all Worthington families should have received the Worth Knowing newsletter in your email box from Worthington Schools. So if you haven't checked that out yet, it should come from Worthington Schools, titled Worth Knowing. This email details what you need to know for back to school. And there's a few things, so we want you to check that out. Finally, we'll be responsible and transparent with our community's resources. In late July, we met with a representative of Management Advisory Group. This organization is working with CODA to uncover red flags as they pursue a half-cent sales tax on the November ballot for rapid transit development. So their Link Us project is the comprehensive transportation initiative that this half-cent sales tax would support. From a school district perspective, we believe this initiative could benefit our students and families, and sales tax is a good option that does not compete with our school funding source. So look for that this November. President Hudson, that's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Would anyone like to share any comments or reactions? Anything to discuss with Dr. Bowers' report? Okay, thank you again. Mr. Cusick, would you like to share the treasurer's report?
Certainly, thank you. Just a few items on tonight's agenda that I think deserve some background. So first off, you are asked to approve an addendum to the lease agreement with Swim Inc. regarding our aquatic complex. This is a bit late, should have been done before construction, but it was tied up between surveyors and legal. But basically, as you know, we lease that entire parcel to Swim Inc. Currently, this agreement will carve out the natatorium portion, the new and old natatorium portions, and leave remaining the outdoor parcel. And so once we complete construction, we'll be left with a lease to Swim Inc. for the outdoor portion. As we are aware, the city is moving to put a measure on the ballot. If successful, we have indicated we could likely terminate the lease and sell them the property at the time, but until then, this gets us out of an issue with liability and constructing an asset on land that we currently lease. So this addendum corrects that. Also on this agenda is the approval of Christopher Crawford to fill an open position in our department related to Leah Baker's departure. I mentioned that because most of you have likely heard about the cybersecurity incident that happened to the city of Columbus in the past few weeks. Jeff's Collett's team has been working hard over the past year to implement various cybersecurity measures, including working with the Ohio Cyber Reserve that was mentioned by Governor DeWine and providing our employees training. I circle this back to Chris. Chris comes to us with a degree in cybersecurity, and so he will not only fill a financial role for us, but we'll share him with Jeff Collett's team to continue to engage our employees and help enhance those measures. Make no mistake about it, this is an area where we can spend $1 billion and still be vulnerable, but I do think it's worth mentioning in light of the recent Columbus attack that we're taking all the right steps And Chris is certainly a great addition to our team in that regard. And then lastly, I don't like to end on a bad note. I should have switched the order. But the yield on the, just a market update, I know I follow the bond market more than most of you probably, that's my job, but the yield on the 5-year treasury is down almost a full percent this past few weeks, which is significant. The unemployment rate increased, and so many people now think that the Federal Reserve is going to cut interest rates very quickly and more significant than in the past. And so I mention this because we ladder out our investment portfolio. We locked in some funds at a higher rate, but we do have construction bills to pay, and so we are subject to some short-term rates. And so if rates continue to move in that direction, that will negatively impact us. Now, on the bright side, if you're in the market for a home or a car or any type of loan, that should help you. So there, I ended on a high note. That is my report.
Well done, very well done. And everything I read today said not to panic.
I think it's overblown personally. I think everything will stabilize, but that's just me. What do I know?
Thank you, Mr. Cusick. Any questions or comments? Okay. All right, that brings us to approval of minutes. And back to you. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over our board committee reports and announcements. Thank you. Would anyone like to raise their hand and start first? Be first to start. Thank you. Kelly.
I don't really have a lot, actually, because we haven't had any committees since it's been summer. Not that we haven't been doing anything, but we haven't met as committees, though I am looking forward to our committees starting up in the coming months, since we're 9 days away from the start of the school year. I did attend, most of us attended the teacher welcome and lunch, which was really good. So thank you, Angie and Jeff, for putting that on and inviting us and including us in that. Just great to see the excitement of the new staff that's coming in. Yeah, and so it was great to interact with them and just see the work in action. As they talked, I got to see a little glimpse of them talking about Portrait of a Learner during Angie's fun day. It was really fun.
Not tasking in the slightest.
But it was really good, so I appreciate you inviting us and including us in that. I did share, I just wanted to let the three of you know and TJ know that I shared with Dr. Bowers and Nikki about different presentation ideas that they asked us to share. So one recommendation was Biz Ed. I just think it would be really beneficial for all of us to hear how that is utilized throughout the entire district. It will be good for us to hear. It will be good for families to be able to hear that type of presentation. So I did send in that suggestion. And I also talked about DISC training, which probably would be more beneficial in a work session. I know at the beginning of the year, we were sent the assessment tool, and I'm not, like, if you completed it or not. So just that suggestion to throw that out there. I did ask Kelly Wegley, hi Kelly, and she did say it will take about 90 minutes to 2 hours. So it wouldn't necessarily take up the entire work session time, and it doesn't have to be September. We also have one scheduled for December, but I just think having gone through that assessment and processing that assessment, and just went to a leadership meeting last week where we went over that DISC assessment and how to interact with others if you're a C versus an S, and all those things, and just how to work better together. So I just think that will be beneficial. So I also made that suggestion. And then the last thing is not necessarily a presentation per se, but just continuation of the special education audit and the portrait in practice and all the great things that are going on in our district. That's going to happen over time, I know, and you guys are already doing a great job in updating us. And so just a continuation of that work in addition to all the other things, construction and all the things that are happening in our district. I think you guys do a good job with that. And so I appreciate a continuation of being updated about what's going on when our teachers are interacting with changes that are happening, so that if we get questions, we'll be able to generally answer them and point people in the right direction. So that's all I have, though.
Excellent. Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate you circling back on the amount of time. And I actually think that September 27th will be a good time for it. I mean, obviously, we can all talk about what else is slated at that time, My other idea for that time was just actually to ask our new board members if a review of anything would be helpful. I mean, at that point, it will have been, 9 months in, and would it be helpful to review the handbook or have our council talk about like how to navigate anything it may be, right? So I really look to the two of you to think about also what would be most beneficial for that particular work session. Excellent. Amber, anything on your end, knowing that we haven't had committee meetings? Okay. I'll just echo the gratitude for the invitation and the participation in the start of the school year for our new teachers. I agree, Kelly. It's wonderful to see the new faces and feel the excitement in the room. And the not just the excitement, but the true welcoming of the entire district, and to see those who are there just pulled right into the fold. So it's wonderful. Appreciate being able to participate. Your turn,
Very
Stephanie.
quick this time. I'm excited for the school year to start. I'm excited for convocation because I've never been to one. So
I love it.
I'm looking forward to two.
Mm-hmm.
Two. Yes. Well, yeah. So thank you for bringing up your ideas that you want to see as presentations. I have not submitted my ideas yet, and I think as a new board member, it's good for me to hear from everybody kind of what they're thinking, because I don't have the breadth of experience that you guys have, so I don't know all the options out there, right? So I think it would be, I would appreciate a conversation, and it doesn't have to be this year, but I like the idea that we could kind of talk about things that we'd like to see, and maybe also for the work session too, to think about things that have been kind of mulling around that we could address for the work session. So thank you for that. And I just want to say, as the school year kicks off, we've seen a little bit more engagement via email or at board meetings with people speaking. And I am really encouraged to hear that, because I think all of us like to hear from our community. It's important for us. Sometimes we sit up here and feel like we're in a little bit of a echo chamber staring at each other. So I just wanted to thank anybody that's listening or is here tonight. It's very helpful for us. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you. Jennifer?
I do not have any committee reports, but I will just echo everybody else on the new teacher orientation. They all seem to be so happy and engaged and have a good time at all days. And we were happy to be there. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Cusick, that does now bring us to approval of the minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the July 22nd meeting as presented in enclosure D1, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve an addendum to the lease agreement with Swim Inc. as presented in enclosure E1.
So moved.
Second? Any questions or comments regarding the addendum?
Just for my clarification, if I'm reading it correctly, it redefines what happens after the old building goes away. And I know there's some stuff up in the air with what is going to happen to the outdoor pool, but this doesn't really get into what happens there. We're waiting on other. Okay.
Correct. There's two things that happen with this lease. I didn't get into the details. It's a little bit complicated, but we are leaving in the lease to Swim Inc. the current natatorium because they're going to operate it.
Right.
And then as soon as the new natatorium comes online, that triggers the
Okay.
lease expiring for the old natatorium, and then
Sure.
we'll bulldoze it.
Sure.
And that just leaves the outdoor area.
And the outdoor is still within the contract, and we'll deal
Correct.
with that as a
So
separate-
regardless of what happens with the bond
Okay.
issue.
Yeah, thank you.
we're-
Okay.
we're
That's
set.
it for me.
Excellent. Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Dr. Bowers?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. That's items F2 through F14 on your agenda. The consent agenda, F2 through F14, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G1. Item G1 is the acceptance of the donations listed on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding the donations? Seeing none, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G2. Item G2 is approving the resolution confirming the impracticality of busing to newly enrolled students, as declared by myself, the superintendent, to Alma Dina Academy.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes. Motion carries. And that brings us to requests, questions, or concerns from the board. Anything? Okay. Which then brings us to the calendar. Our next regular meeting will occur on August 26th, followed by September 9th, and then our work session, I think, is listed inaccurately here. I believe pursuant to our first meeting of the year, it was the 27th. So I would just note that. And if that's an issue on, sorry that I didn't catch that when we looked at the draft agenda. If that's an issue with the administration, we can regroup.
No issue from an administration standpoint.
Okay.
I just have been confused, obviously, because I've been sending out the 20th, so I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Whichever
how-
it is, we're good with.
Okay, I think it's the 27th.
It is the 27th.
Okay, very
We
good.
changed it at the meeting. So on the original agenda, it says the 20th, but the minutes say the 27th.
27th.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Hence where the
Thank you,
confusion
Jennifer.
comes from.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jennifer, for clarifying.
So it's
The
the
source.
27th,
Correct.
not the 20th, okay.
Correct.
Dr. Bowers, were you going to say something?
No, that she caught it. That's what I was,
Got it.
that's what I was circling back to.
Okay, make sure that we address that. Okay, acknowledge that change.
And what will that be at noon until, will that be
Correct, starting at noon, and then, I mean,
till
we
when?
usually
Okay,
are.
TBD, got it.
Yeah. We don't, I know historically have not been past 5.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, there being no further action, I'll request a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
Second.
Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes,
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
thank you. Motion carries, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.